Jonah Comstock, editor-in-chief of pharmaphorum. I'm here at JP Morgan. We're rounding the afternoon of JP Morgan on Monday, and I'm joined by Rick Stewart, the CEO of Achieve Life Sciences. Achieve is taking an interesting new approach to smoking cessation and treatment for nicotine addiction. I'm very interested to hear a little more about that.
Thank you, Jonah. Achieve has got a primary mission to address the problem that is public health problem with is nicotine dependence. We've got a drug that has actually already demonstrated strong efficacy and safety. We think that it's going to really be a true solution to the problem that we've got now with nicotine dependence.
I mean, and tell me more about that, because I feel like this is a situation where the stigma is part of the problem. People don't treat it like a disease, even less so than alcoholism. So, how does that kind of inform your approach?
You're absolutely right. We are moving this from a moral issue to a medical issue. I mean, very much like the GLP-1s moved obesity in the same way. I think that there's a shame factor today with smoking, and it is a medical condition that we're treating. Nicotine is the third most addictive drug after heroin and cocaine. So there needs to be a solution and a treatment for it.
So talk to me about the treatment that you have, what you were developing, how does it work, and how far along is it in sort of the process?
Right. Well, this is a drug that's actually been around for many, many years in Eastern Europe. But what we did was to effectively redevelop it into a form that is far more patient-friendly. So it has a long history of efficacy and safety, but we're supported by the NIH in terms of the non-clinical program. We've now just completed the 2 phase 3 clinical trials, and we'll be filing the NDA next quarter.
You said completed the phase 3?
Yep.
Wow.
And we're filing the NDA in the second quarter of this year.
So getting very close to market, hopefully.
Our focus is purely on getting the NDA filed, and we're aiming to launch in probably the third or fourth quarter of 2026. And we believe it's a game changer. Historically, the smoking cessation drugs have had good efficacy, but strong side effects. We have both. We've got really good efficacy and great side effect profile. The issue previously was nausea and vomiting when you first start to take the drug. We don't have that. And that is a limitation on compliance. Mm-hmm. So other issues were sleep disturbances and headaches. And again, we've got a very benign overall side effect profile.
When you have something like this that isn't maybe treated and considered as a medical condition as much as it should be, mm-hmm. How does it affect your marketing once you have it? How are you really focusing on getting doctors to prescribe it, or are you going to have to go more of a consumer route?
We have a pretty advanced data-driven and it's precision targeting of both physicians and patients. We're already aware, we know who the physicians are who've written prescriptions for a previous smoking cessation drug. There's around about 47,000 of them, and we know exactly where they are and who they are. So our issue is actually delivering the right message to the right people at the right time, but also getting the feedback, because we need to be able to, in a digital environment, we need to be able to take that data and actually adapt it to refining that message. So, and the same applies to the patients. What we're looking at are dedicated quitters, people who really do want to quit. Of the 29 million smokers in the US, roughly 55% of them every year have a quit attempt, but only 9% of them are successful. So there are some dedicated quitters out there that we want to target, and we know how to do that from a digital perspective.
Yeah. It is pretty incredible when you think about the history here, and how many public health dollars have gone to mm-hmm. trying to get people to quit smoking and to try to change the defaults. Yet there are still so many people doing it, and it's still an industry. So yeah, I mean, you talked about kind of making this a medical issue, not a moral issue. Mm-hmm. But how do you what's the scope of what you feel like you can achieve here?
Well, if you look at the comorbidities that are associated with smoking, anything from COPD, respiratory diseases, cardiovascular, obviously lung cancer, the association and cause of many of those diseases is often ignored. Yeah, and so we've got a drug that can actually address those, and it has benefit both in the short and the long term. So, for example, of the 16 million COPD patients in the US, 80% of them have got the disease because they were smokers. But of those 16 million, 6 million are still smoking. So if we can actually stop them smoking, we can reduce the exacerbations, we can reduce the number of hospitalizations, and we can actually make the standard of care work better. So we can actually incrementally do that, very much, as I said, along the lines of the GLP-1s.
What brings you to a conference like this? Who are you meeting with, and how are you kind of trying to advance your goal through these? Is it investors? Is it partners? Is it?
It's a combination. We're meeting a lot of investors, and we're getting a great reception because I think of the advanced stage of the company. We're also talking to partners as well because it's an attractive asset, not just in the US, but overseas. We have started a strategy for regulatory approval in Europe as well, and we've got interest from Asia for the drug itself. But our primary focus is the US and to get the drug submitted. I think that there's another element that we need to think about also is that very much the nicotine dependence market is a bit like whack-a-mole. You start off with smoking and smoking cessation. We're now looking at vaping and vaping cessation. I think we're grossly underestimating the public health risk associated with vaping. The problem there is it's a much younger patient population we're dealing with. Majority of vapers are in the 18 to 34 age range. They're taking a much heavier nicotine load from the vapes. Contained in vapes are a number of contaminants, including formaldehyde. There's heavy metals in there. And the vapes themselves are very fine particles that are getting into the deep lung. So we're only now starting to experience some of the health harms associated with vaping. So our next step, obviously, as we go into the vaping phase 3 trial that we're starting next year, is to really focus in on expanding the utility of the drug into those markets.
That's fascinating. Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned the US versus the European market, and you said this drug started out in Eastern Europe.
Yep.
My instinct would be to think there are more smokers in Europe than in the US. But then you mentioned vaping, and that's sort of, I think, probably more endemic here. I mean, it's an everywhere problem? How do you make those decisions?
No, it's an everywhere problem. Globally, there are 300 million smokers and an unknown number of vapers. At least in the US, we know there's roughly 11 million adult smokers. But then a lot of the publicity at the moment is the high school students who are vaping. Typically what they'll do is they'll be vaping in the bathroom. But the next crisis on whack-a-mole is tobacco pouches, because many of these children are actually going into class because they can't vape in class, and they're taking tobacco pouches as well.
Chewing tobacco?
Yeah, no, the tobacco pouches that you put onto your gum.
Oh, okay.
So the likes of Zyn, for example.
Okay.
Right. So they're doing that as well. So
it really is a whack-a-mole.
It is. So this load of nicotine that a much younger population is taking, and the addictive qualities of that are going to become a real issue in the not too distant future.
I mean, on the one hand, it seems like nicotine is nicotine. The drug treats the addiction directly.
Mm-hmm.
But why do you have to adapt the approach to these different forms of nicotine?
In terms of different indications?
Yeah.
Well, I think we're just taking a step-by-step approach, right? Mm-hmm. Because obviously the smoking cessation market is by far the largest, and there is precedent for prescription drugs in that market. So as you look at the options for somebody who wants to quit smoking, typically you'll start off with cold turkey, then you'll try nicotine replacement, and then you'll go on to a prescription drug. And it's the balance and the offset between OTC is typically less efficacicious with fewer side effects, but the prescription drugs tend to be more effective, but with more side effects. So it's that balance. Whereas in the new market, and this is where we really see the opportunity in terms of vaping, is that typically in the clinical trial we've run in vaping already, most of the participants in the trial had never tried to quit vaping.
Mm.
So this is a new approach to it. So that they're not stepping through, they're going straight into a prescription alternative.
Yeah, and so you can sort of skip that pipeline, as it were. And
Well, you skip the frustration.
mhm.
These people are asking for our help. They're coming to us and they're asking for our help. And I'll give you a great example, because you can always personalize this. One of the participants in our clinical trial, she asked to talk to us because she had been smoking 60 cigarettes a day for 30 years. And she had tried to quit on numerous occasions and never been successful. And she came onto our clinical trial, and for the first time, she'd actually managed to quit smoking. And that was 18 months ago, and she's still abstinent.
Wow.
She also read a letter to us from her daughter, thanking us for keeping her mother alive, so that she would be able to go to her wedding, to children's baptism, and so on. And that's what really personalizes what we're trying to do.
Well, I can't think of a better note to end on.
Okay.
Thank you, Rick, so much for talking me through this. Is really fascinating market, and one that I'm learning a lot about from you. So
Okay.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonah. Thanks.
Have a good show, and I hope your meetings are productive. And be looking forward to seeing what happens with Achieve in the year to come.
Thank you very much.